So here we are on the Healed Approach podcast again. But today I've got Dave Mills as my guest. Dave Mills from Lyons Annoot. Thank you so much for being here today, Dave.
You're welcome.
So Dave and I, we met each other back in January, I think it was.
Yep.
When I attended the sustainability event that was hosted by E.H. Smith. Sustainability from a bricklayer's perspective.
Yeah. Right.
And then we had the pleasure of also going over to Belgium, going over to Brussels, in fact, to go and see the Van der Sanden pirouette factory.
Yeah.
So there's a theme here, and I think it is sustainability. Tell us about sustainability, what it means to you and what it means to Lyons Annoot.
I think sustainability gets really pigeonholed into people think it's just the environment, the environmental element. It's the environment, and that's the environment in terms of, the next generation coming through in our industry, sustainability of the business, our businesses itself, and obviously the huge amount of elements of looking at our impact on the environment, whether that be how we run our sites and how we run our businesses or whether we look at how we reduce our embodied carbon based on the products that we use. So for us as a business at Lyons Annoot, we're a brickwork contractor. We've been going 53 years. Obviously massive longevity. And it's always by responding to what's happening in our industry and what the future is. So I think a big part of that is probably, in terms of looking at the sustainability in terms of carbon, is 5 years ago, I think it was, when we first got validated by science-based targets, and we were contractor number 5 in the UK, and all the other contractors were major hundreds upon hundreds of £1 million turnover contractors, if not billions. So we did that, and we report on our scope 1 and our scope 2, and we have to reduce it by 50%, which we're doing very well on. But then it's also about actually what else do we have to do in that regard, which has probably been the biggest journey over that period. When you price a project and they're asking you for value engineering to get the price down, we're doing that. But at the same time, we're actually, for the last 5 years, we've been actually putting a price uplift for moving to more environmental, sustainable products, which is really evened out over recent times. But that's kind of been us as a business. And I mean, in terms of sustainability of people, our first apprentice was 1984. He's still with us. He's passed his apprenticeship. But
took him a while.
Yeah, it took him a while. We have people who were apprentices with us in 85, 86, 87 who are still with us. We've got apprentices from the 90s who are still with us, apprentices from the early 2000s who are still with us, and obviously today's current apprentices too, or who have been apprentices in the last 10 years. So that's all about sustainability for us as a business. They know the way we work, they know what we want to achieve, but also how we've brought them in through that period. So I think that's a massive one. I think it often gets lost, the sustainability of our industry or of our people, by just focusing on singular points. So for us, it's huge, encompassing so many different aspects of what we have to do as a business, including social value.
Yeah. Well, it all goes into one big pot, I think, doesn't it? And it's really interesting because I still think that as an industry, we try and pull all of the pieces of the puzzle apart and look at them separately. Mm-hmm. It's like we're going to put in a bid and we need to look at social value, and then we need to look at sustainability, and we need to look at this, and it's actually, it all should be part of the bigger picture. Yeah. And I think, from what I know of Lyons Annoot, I think that you're taking responsibility for that, mm-hmm. and kind of, leading the way, so to speak. And I guess that kind of does bring me on to, it's really interesting what you said as well about your apprentices, and, obviously the retention of your apprentices has been really good. Yeah. I don't know if that's always the case across the industry.
I think, you had Gary Staines on previously, and Gary focuses on the mentoring aspect. Our apprenticeship for all of our apprentices, the name of the program is Mentor Me,
Yeah.
because it literally is something we need massively in the industry. So Gary's 100% right. And it is happening. I mean, there's so many really, really good, I mean, from our industry, brickwork contractors out there who are investing huge amounts of money in apprenticeships, in doing different methods, some very similar methods. But I wouldn't knock any of them for what they're doing. But the reality is the whole situation comes down to that apprentice, once they start with you, is part of the fabric of your business. You have to mentor them.
Yeah.
You have to help them. You have to be there for them. You have to support the whole holistic journey for them. And the reality is you're not sending them away to learn. You're not the big one for me is always, and is where people don't actually understand what their apprentices are having to do, what they're doing in college, what they're if they're let's say a bricklaying apprentice, what the standards are, what the endpoint assessment they have to go through is. How is it different from potentially when the owner of the business or one of the management in the business did their apprenticeship, and understand what they're having to learn, so you can support them. And if you have to be there with them, and they have to have people who are there for support. I mean, we're talking a little about in many instances about people who's potentially their first job.
Yes.
Generally younger, so you can't, whether you're young or old, sometimes you just need that support network around you to help you with everything, and that's just what we try to do, and I know others do.
I think also as well, it's important to change the perception that you have to be, it has to be your first job, or it has to be your first go at an apprenticeship, because I think that's an important thing. I think that gets lost as well, because I actually think, you could have been in the industry and you could be retraining, you could have come out of the industry and you could be retraining. And I think that's a really important part of the bigger picture in terms of kind of dealing with the skills gap, that often gets lost. It's not just about, is it bringing in the younger generation? But I think I just, what you mentioned there about how we need to support apprentices coming into our businesses, I think you're absolutely right. And I'd love to delve more into what Mentor Me looks like for Lyons Annoot. But I think that also there's that kind of, we know we need to invest so much in them. That's why we're not investing in them at all. Does that make sense?
At the end of the day, if you buy a house, you don't let it go to rack and ruin. You repaint it. You get new furniture. You invest your money in it.
Yeah.
You've bought whatever the value of the house is, and you've now invested more money into it. The reality is apprentices need that investment, and that investment is time, which is money in many instances, but it's time, it's understanding, it's as I said, the holistic part of being there for somebody, and it doesn't always go well. It definitely doesn't always go well, but the reality is announcing you've taken on 20 apprentices, and after 3 months there's 2 of them left. You've failed, and that's it. You have failed, and it's not you have failed because those apprentices have left. Sometimes it's just not the right pathway for them, but it's how you manage and make sure that of those 20 that started, you actually gave them all that attention, you gave them all that time. So businesses have to focus on what they can manage. It's not just in terms of, let's take on 1 million apprentices and we've done really, really well.
To tick a box, probably.
Yeah, you've got to finish them if you can. Now, again, I'm not saying it's easy, but you've got to put in that extra investment, and that extra investment will hopefully, bear dividends much bigger than the investment will ever be in the long term.
And do you think those, I guess those, and not just, in terms of contractors, there's obviously lots of, different apprenticeships within the industry. Mm-hmm. And, obviously some with, better success than others. But do you think there is a need, I guess, to shift mindsets around what apprenticeships mean and what they can bring? And because I think, like I said to you before, I just still think that there's there's this generally this feeling that we have to invest so much and we're not necessarily going to get a return on our investment in the short term. But I guess for Lyons Annoot, you have seen that return on investment.
Proof is in the pudding.
And I'm wondering as well, so there's two questions there really in terms of mindset and shifting mindset. And obviously I think you talking about and sharing what you're doing, I think is really, really important in terms of setting the scene moving forward for anybody, invested in this space. But I think also as well, do you feel that they've had a role to play in terms of you driving forward with what you're doing around sustainability and how you're kind of doing things a bit differently?
Well, it's an interesting one, because actually what we have a process of doing is, as we look at new products, whether they're more sustainable or not, we've often sent it to our college partner so that our apprentices could play with them first and see how they work. So we had a local.
Oh, they're taking all of your fun away.
Well, no, it's the reality is actually and it builds their confidence, because so we had a low carbon mortar that we were working with, and the first people to use it were our apprentices. They were building something in college, and we spoke to the college and the tutors we partner with, and said, look, if we get you some of this, will you see how it goes? Give us the feedback. So we got feedback from the apprentices, who are fresh, they're new, apprentices from the tutors. Impressions from the tutors of what they thought about it, and we've done that with actually lots of new products that we've taken. We've said, we'll go send us some to the college. We'll see the basic feedback, but also what is done with new products that we have to start using because of maybe approved document B in terms of fire or whatever it might be. Actually, the apprentices then come to site with a bit more knowledge.
Yeah.
Before the bricklayers have had CPDs or training, the apprentices, they can feel a bit, what's the word I want to, they can feel a little bit of the fact that they know something before somebody else does. And we had this.
Creates more a sense of a belonging as well.
They've got a belonging, and we can't do that with everything. But, I remember when we first started using a product, it was the Keyfix cavity tray, and Keyfix sponsor our apprenticeship. And we had that out at the college. They did a CPD. They had something to play with, which is as I said, a fire rated cavity tray. And I remember the first site we then used it on, I was asked some questions about the install, and I said, have you spoken to the apprentices? There was 3 apprentices on that site, and they were able to give feedback. Now, obviously, we did the CPDs with the management and with the bricklayers on site, but the apprentices had that little bit where they were able to tell them something, and it just, it's just giving them that opportunity to know a little bit more. And it has been part of the low carbon journey as well. They have played as part of their learning with products that we're looking at, or that we've brought forward, and seen possibly the difficulties before it gets to site, or the benefits.
I guess there's all sorts kind of in there, in terms of obviously the sense of belonging, them being more connected to what's going on. There's also this, what they're kind of doing as well, and what they're playing with, or experimenting with. It's real life, change that's happening on site, and I think that's really super powerful in terms of getting the apprentices on board and invested and what have you. I mean, how commonplace is it for that to be happening?
I think plenty of people do. I mean, I know of other firms that they have those relationships, and the people come in and support. I think there's a lot of companies that do it for advertising and whatever else, but I think there's a lot of genuine companies that actually give that investment in the apprentices. But it's changing a lot of the mindset. I mean, we go and talk to schools, and we learned very quickly, and I do go on about it. We learned very quickly that actually myself or April, who's our apprentice liaison and health and safety manager, standing in front of a bunch of younger people, the reality is we weren't connecting.
Yeah.
So we changed it around.
Yeah.
And it was some of the in terms of bricklaying, it was some of the guys who were in their final year who actually qualified, who go in now and talk. So there was one done recently. We didn't even go, either April or I, and it was Sanj and Isaac, and they went in and gave us fantastic feedback on how it went, and hearing the feedback from the people who were there, the level of engagement, because it was the similar to me effect. You know, you can deal with people who are more similar to you. So the reality is having relatively young apprentices who are in their early 20s, who've come through their apprenticeship, who've qualified, and now earning very good money. When they're speaking to somebody who can relate to them, they're going to get a huge amount more. True, you know, and I think that's it's a big one. It's a bit psychological, really. Well, it is psychological in terms of how you do it. But that wasn't something we were planned. We're going to do this, and it was just we started doing it, and then we found the name Similar to Me effect afterwards while reading. You know,
it's interesting as well. I think that's a really important point about how I think we get so fixed on having to have a plan, having to have a way forward, having to be able, you know, mapping things out. And actually the beauty sometimes comes in. And this is where I feel like, you know, this is where, you know, this is maybe a bit of a broad and a sweeping statement, but I do feel like as we see more women in senior leadership positions, because women are a little bit more in flow in terms of their leadership and a little bit more open to trying things a little bit that maybe don't have, you know, we don't know exactly what the outcome's going to be, or we don't know exactly what the return on investment is going to be. Whereas I think a lot of the time, you know, in the industry and masculine types of leadership can be like, we need to know exactly where we're going. So there's this beauty, there's this kind of beauty in kind of letting those work alongside each other. Does that make sense? So
I don't think it's a male female thing. I think it's a diversity of ideas.
Yeah,
that comes from many different aspects.
But I guess it's no, I think you're right,
Yeah.
and I guess it's less of kind of maybe male female, just the different energies, the different energies in it is what I mean.
I think
because I think sometimes we get caught up in masculine being men and feminine being.
I think there's so many. It is that diversity of ideas and that come from so many different people from their backgrounds, their own upbringings, their what they've seen, their visions, their strategies. I mean, strategy is obviously important. You know, when we went down the road of, you know, looking at embodied carbon, you know, the strategy was, this is what we're going to do. There wasn't by this date we're going to do this, and by this date we're going to do that, and whatever. The strategy was, how are we going to make sure that what we do and what we try to do with everything we do is that it's the best of our ability.
Yeah.
And there wasn't, so the strategy in terms of that can change like literally overnight, in terms of, you know, something comes up, or we've witnessed something, or we've seen something, or we've been part of something, and we say, well, how can we do that a bit better? You know, I've you know, very fortunate that everyone in the business is on the same wavelength, and the reality is we're looking at different things at the moment, and in terms of social value and what we can do. And we've spoken to CITV about, you know, how we can, what their belief is on that and what we offer on our projects, and, you know, how we get involved in the communities. And, you know, we've now formulated a document which will be automatically filled out to show our clients exactly what we're offering on every project, which will be, I can't go into it too much, but it'll be formulated that this is what we're going to do on this project to benefit the community around it.
I guess what I'm kind of taking away from what you've been talking about here in terms of your leadership is that you've got a clear vision, and you know what you want to achieve, but you're quite flexible and open in the route that might take, if that kind of.
I think, you know, for us as a business, as I said, we've been going 53 years. You know, the business intention and strategy has always been the same. You do the best that you can.
Yeah.
That's been drilled into those of us who've worked for 20 years, and then when we took over the business, nothing changes. You do the best of what you can. So if you're going to go down the road of doing something, you don't do it half-arsed.
No.
You know, you do it to the best of your ability, and you collaborate with like-minded people, and you collaborate with people who aren't like-minded as well, who are
Well,
coming
yeah,
from different aspects.
yeah.
But the reality is with collaboration, and I think this is one of the big things about collaboration, people always fall on that fallback of dealing with people that they're like me, so it's all good. I think similar to me really works when you're trying to get people into our industry, but I think it doesn't work sometimes when you're moving things forward.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I kind of picked up on that when you were talking about it earlier, and I think that fundamentally, right, you do need to see yourself. Yeah, you need to, whether it's age, gender, sexuality, whatever it is, you need to be able to see yourself to feel that you can achieve. Right. So what I'm saying is that we want to see people like ourselves. We want to, we want to feel that sense of connection with people like ourselves. But also as well, it is about creating that space. So it's great that, obviously that you're doing that, but it's also about creating that space where people feel safe enough to open up and collaborate and share diverse ideas with people that they don't necessarily relate to. Because I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have that. We have the questioning of what are we doing? We have to go on the journey that we have gone on. Hate the word journey, but to go on that journey that we have gone on over the last few years in terms of looking at sustainability from an environmental perspective, in terms of carbon, it's needed so many different ideas, because the reality is we're a brickwork contractor, and the reality is we lay bricks and we lay blocks, and to step outside that is very, very different. So we need you do. I mean, it is surrounding yourself with people who are like is can be very good, but it can also be a massive burden, and also it can be a massive actually part of you not moving anywhere.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? We need to feel that we belong. We need to feel that who we are is respected and valued. And that's why, that's what I mean about like when you see, but this is why, again, the diversity is so important, because you want to attract those different thoughts and ideas. So if you've got lots of different people, then you kind of, you're going to be like, oh, I can see somebody like me, but two, there are lots of people not like me. So we can have these conversations, and, and I think that's what we really need to work more towards. And it's interesting as well, because I do want to go back to, like you said, it's not necessarily, it's not that we need to tick a box. We don't need to fill a quota. We don't need to have X amount of women, X amount of men, X amount of young people. It's about the different energies and how they kind of, how they come together, and the best things are made through the best things come out of like a bit of a messy period as well.
I think you're right. I think I was at something probably about a year ago that was on equity and diversity, and the conversation was very focused on male female, and I think it's fantastic we're seeing the change. But the reality was the issue we have in construction, and we have in so many industries, healthcare, infrastructure, everything is actually continuing to get people into our industry and showing it as the industry was. So we need to be more diverse in showing people that the industry is open for everyone. Yeah. Everyone has a place in construction. I always say it's a bit like rugby. In rugby, they always say there's a place for every person on the team. There is, because there's so many different sizes, so many different. Construction's the exact same. There is a place for every single person on that team. There's so many roles. It's not just hard hats and IVs. It's from your surveyors to your designers to your BIM coordinators to your management to manufacturers with the materials to the salespeople with materials. It's just that needs so many different ways of thinking.
Yeah. And we can't achieve what we need to achieve from a sustainability perspective if we don't have, like you said, you've already said it. You need all of those ideas. You need all of that thinking around the table. Otherwise, you're never going to see outside of the box, and you're never going to see the blind spots. And I think we have to be really careful, and not just from a gender perspective, but from every angle, to make sure it's not an us-them situation.
Completely.
But you've kind of sparked something else in, kind of another topic as well, about, like you said, you're absolutely right. The industry is for everybody, and the industry needs everybody. Yet there still seems to it still seems to be hard to maybe own our diversity in the industry, if that makes sense. So I still hear a lot about, neurodiversity, for example. Just using this for an example, a lot of people in the industry will not necessarily own the fact or be honest about the fact that they may be struggling with dyslexia or ADHD or something like that. And, they want to mask it and hide it. And that can be a challenge in itself. And it's kind of like, how do we even get into a place where people can't? And where do we get into a place where I was having this conversation? I did a session for some graduates, construction graduates recently. And they were like, what do I do when I'm going to an interview? Do I tell them I've got ADHD before I go? Do I not? And when did this become such a thing?
All of our apprentices have cognitive assessments.
I saw that, yeah.
So, and that wasn't our thing originally. It was the company we work with on our bricklaying and our administration apprentices, the training trust, and it was something they did. But straight up, 10 years ago when I first saw it, it was kind of like, really, what, do we need this? But actually, it was then when you start saying, you had a report back, so and so doesn't listen. If you tell them to, they just don't get it. And then you looked at these cognitive assessments, you went, oh, wow. And then we started implementing that and how we deal with people. Obviously, the college uses it as well, but how we help people, how we deal with people, and how we bring them forward. And I think it's not new age or anything like that. It's actually, it goes with the whole investment of investing in people. They're when you're investing in people, obviously that from a health and safety perspective, your job is to make sure they go home safe every day, that they're not being put in from a construction site, that they're not being put in danger in terms of the materials they're using. That's your most important job. And if you can assist them and you can get every little bit of information that you can to assist these people, assist yourselves, then that's the right way to do things. And I think we do diversity. We have full diversity forms which everyone is filled out, and it's it's diversity of everything, of age and everything. Just to, it's almost like statistics, and it's amazing as well when you see a constant stream of publicity about something in construction, and you look at your own workforce and see, well, ours isn't like that. Probably because of our apprenticeship scheme, our workforce. We've got really experienced. Obviously, we've got guys 85, 86, 84. But we've also got quite a relatively young workforce.
Yeah.
In that right age gap.
I remember you, which is, I remember I posted something from one of my podcasts and we're talking about obviously the aging workforce in the industry. And I think you did comment and say, well, actually, that's not true for us. But again, statistics, you can cherry pick whatever you want.
The reality is if you're not investing and if you're not, and some companies will always find it very difficult to have an apprentice. We're on projects potentially for a very short period of time. If you've got something like an S106 where they're saying you need to take on one apprentice on this project, it could be difficult if your next project, and I know business like that, if your next project's 40 miles away, that apprentice is going to struggle to get there. So it has to be the investment on the business focus long term rather than just those quick fixes, because they'll never work.
But also as well, that kind of brings me a little bit onto like what you mentioned about the diversity assessments, etc., and that they should be just part of a bigger picture as well. Like they're important, they are, but they are part of, fundamentally, we should know our people. I mean, obviously, when people first come in, you need to do these assessments. You need to understand about, what makes them tick, how they work, etc. But fundamentally, as leaders, we need to make sure, or as organisations, we also need to make sure that we're investing in our leadership and making sure that we can, as leaders, we know our people. We're going to have the assessments, we're going to have the stuff on paper, but actually, what does that look like in day to day? How does that look like for Luca or Leo? I'm saying those names because everyone says Jack or Fred or whatever. Anyway, what does that look like for Jack or Fred or Luca or Leo on site? How does it make them tick? What does it mean in practical terms as opposed to just what's on the form? So it's about using data from, in terms of that, the data that we get there, but it's also in terms of the data that we get through our interactions and through our everyday, going going about on site, etc. And I think for me as well, you mentioned about health and safety and making sure that people are getting at home safely in terms of materiality. But also as well, how many accidents are happening on site because of, because we don't know our people well enough, because of mental health, because we're not taking into consideration the journey that they've got to take to get into work, etc. Because I think that sometimes gets lost as well.
I think you're right. It's knowing your people. I mean, we've, out of our project managers, all except one were apprentices with us at one stage from the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. So we do know, in terms of that longevity of business means everyone really, and the fact that you're trying to, I think it's a massive investment in apprentice. It's a big investment. If you're making an investment in anything, you want it to last. So if you've got an apprentice, the apprentices that you're training, or the 2 apprentices, or the 10 apprentices, or whatever you're doing, you want to make sure that they're staying with you. They're not going somewhere else, and that they want to be there. And that's a massive part of it. And to kind of go back on probably one of the questions you asked ages ago now, but it was about how the apprentices affect the sustainability element. Well, of course they do, because I think it was mentioned previously that the new generation expect a more sustainable world. Yeah. From our view on sustainability, the best way for sustainability to work is actually in terms of embodied carbon. Going to sustainability word, we have to use it, but in terms of embodied carbon, is making sure people don't realize the change, because that is a huge one, and because people hate change. So the reality is, if somebody walks down one of our high streets, they don't want to see something that's completely different in anything. But they don't want to see it. If you can make those massive changes in embodied carbon by how we manufacture, how we change things, how we use it, we have the skilled trades to use it. Now, what we're seeing massively is people wanting to throw the baby out with the bathwater. They're saying, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. They've no tested details around their products. I've mentioned this to so many people who have products which are massively low carbon, but have no technical details. But the products have to be better, or at least the same, of what we can already offer. So I think part of that is as you're a parent, being a parent, you want a better world for your children. We all see lots of stuff on television, not wanting to mention politics. We've got a very much you look at the States where it's drill baby drill, you've got to look at that and actually to say, well, okay, people are putting up a fight, but they're thinking of organizations like Just Stop Oil and things like that, which have a negative impact on what we're trying to do. If people can't see the change in what we do in construction, but we're making those changes, but people can't see it, but we're doing better, well, that's massive for me. The reason we use brick is because it's fireproof. We've made it in the UK and made it in our near partners, near neighbours. The ceramics industry in the UK has 18,000 people working in the manufacturing sector. That's sustainability. What are those 18,000 people doing? And there's sustainability in their work. And that's before you look at the bricklayers, before you look at all the other aspects around it. So to look at something and just go, well, we'll throw that away, and we're now going to use something that's been used somewhere which doesn't have the same climate as us, which doesn't have the same training as us, which doesn't have the same skill level, is nonsense. And it's people will notice it. But if you make those changes, and you make those changes that are seriously reducing embodied carbon, which we can do on our package of works now by 50%, at least 50%, you're making a massive difference to what we're currently doing. And if we all reduce by 50%, and I know all trades can't because of it does involve changes, but something that's really impressing me at the moment is the reuse of steel on many of the buildings coming up in London. Amazing, but there will always be a steel industry, There will have to always be a steel industry because some products that we make will always need steel, and we should embrace that too. But how do you make it better? And that's the big one. We've got to maintain what we're doing by making subtle changes that doesn't scare anybody, and that's the big one. If you scare people, you will have that effect of these people are trying to change us, these people are trying to do this. If you don't scare people and you're just making those changes and it's working, then we're doing what we can do.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to kind of wrap it up, Dave. I think you've made a really important, you've relayed a really important message there. And I think, actually, change is going to happen, change needs to happen, but we need to bring people along with us. We need to not scare people, like you say, but we also need to be bold in what we are doing and lead from the front, I think. And I think the key message here as well is there is no right or wrong way, and we've got to integrate the old with the new. And that's how we kind of move along on this journey, which you hate the word of. Anyway, yeah. I can't think of any other word to use other than journey. But thank you, Dave. Thank you so much. I know you're super passionate about what you do, and I know what Lyons Annoot are doing is fantastic. So keep waving the flag, keep doing what you're doing, and excited to continue the conversations further. Thank you.